Hey, what's up with it, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now, this is going to be a variation of a PvP build. If you guys are trying to play some demo, mess around, and you kind of want to mix it up, try a different setup. We're going to be playing a different PvP build here. So let's go ahead and queue up for just a normal BG here so I can show you guys in action. I'll put the timestamps down below if you are just wanting to see one specific part of this. But I'm going to go over the talents, and then we're going to go over some of the, like legendaries and other things like that. But this build is going to revolve around the honor talent, the PvP talent, pleasure through pain. Now, for those of you guys that don't know what this is going to reduce our Shadow Bolt cast time by a half a second, and it's going to increase our shadow damage by 15%. This shadow damage aspect of this buff applies to basically everything. Hand of Gul'dan damage, Demon Bolt damage, Doom, Bile Scourge Bombers, Decimating Bolt if you're Necrolord. It applies to basically all of our casted damaging spells. So this is pretty significant because as we start getting more and more gear, this is going to be, I would argue, more and more viable potentially. I haven't tried this in competitive like arena settings. The kind of downside or con to this setup is that it requires a lot more kind of casting to set up and get your kind of initial combo done. However, it's not contingent on big cooldowns like Tyrant and Grimoire Felguard, which can be nice. So I plan on testing this build out to some capacity in threes. I think it would actually be pretty good in threes with certain combos like an Ellie Shaman and things like that. And you guys will get to kind of see it in action, but the general idea is it's making all of our actual spells scale about 15% harder as far as how they hit, also reducing the cast time of Shadow Bolt, which makes it the same cast time as Hand of Gul'dan. This is a much quicker, fast-paced kind of casting style. It's really fun. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy this setup in BGs. It's not necessarily the most overall damage, but it's very solid single target burst damage on a very short cooldown as far as when you can kind of rinse and repeat this setup. Now, a couple talents here we'll go through that are kind of significant. The top row, you don't want to run Demonic Strength because you're using your Succubus, not your Felguard. You can go really either of these. I like Dreadlash, and I've been pairing this with From the Shadows. This just gives you a little bit more options if you're in like a team fight situation or a group situation and you cast your Dreadstalkers kind of trying to build up your burst. If for some reason the initial target you were trying to kill, you can't kill, this buff is going to be applied to multiple people, assuming they're in a group. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility as far as if you need to swap targets by having the Dreadlash cleave. But you could also definitely go Bile Scourge Bombers here. As I said, this does scale with the shadow damage buff here. Power Siphon, I think with this setup, is the go-to by default. And then, like I mentioned, From the Shadows is also very strong because this is going to scale off our Demon Bolt, which is basically what we're using to try and get as much burst as possible. Down in the bottom two rows here, Inner Demons is my go-to just because we're running Sacrifice Souls as well. So this is kind of just constantly giving us a damage buff to our Shadow Bolt and our Demon Bolt, as well as making it a little bit easier and not necessarily contingent on having Hand of Gul'dans being casted to prep our Power Siphon. If we have imps up just from passively from Inner Demons, it allows us to be able to Power Siphon if for some reason we're not able to hard cast Hand of Gul'dan. And keep in mind, Hand of Gul'dan is on the same spell school. It's Shadow Flame's same spell school as Demon Bolt, so you don't want to get kicked on Hand of Gul'dan during like a burst window. So having that flexibility I think is really strong, more so than the RNG aspect of Soul Conduit. Grimoire Felguard is always a good choice, but I'm just running Inner Demons for kind of showcasing this setup. Sacrifice Souls is also going to be the go-to here. It's very common to have 5, 6, 10 imps up at a given time, or just demons in general. So you get a lot of value from this just as far as our overall sustained damage with Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt. Now, PvP talents, the only thing that's really relevant here is Pleasure Through Pain. Master Summoner is kind of always the go-to. The third one, you could really kind of run whatever, but this is what I'm running here for this video. Now, when we talk about legendaries here, there's really there's three options, but two are stronger in my opinion. We have Bale Spiders, which is the stacking buff. You can see here that will get the buff. I have the Weak Auras tracking it. It's also tracked up here on the top right. This is really good if you can get it off and maintain this buff or get this buff up to 4 stacks when you go into your burst window. However, 15 seconds is not that long in PvP, and it can be kind of difficult in certain situations, if you have, you know, people focusing you and things like that, it can be actually pretty hard to utilize this legendary. If you're able to free cast, maybe in like a BG scenario, things like that, I do think this is the strongest, the most potent as far as adding to our burst and giving us just straight power. But it's also contingent on you being able to free cast, and you basically end up having to add in some way 4 Shadow Bolt casts prior to getting your burst off, or at the very least getting 4 Shadow Bolt casts off immediately or initially, and then kind of maintaining the buff with a Shadow Bolt cast every here and there, which is definitely doable. It's not something that can't be done. It just has, it's not as kind of like, it's a little more cast heavy, I should say. So it's going to make you a little more prone to being interrupted. And if you're not very good at watching, you know, enemy players or enemy teams' kicks and being able to juke them and, you know, use different spell schools, this is going to be a little bit harder for you to utilize in PvP. I definitely think the damage bonus is there, but this is going to be a little bit of a higher skill cap legendary to use with this build, and it's going to require you to be a little more aware of the enemy players, enemy teams' interrupts. Now, another good option here is... let's throw on our other gloves. We have Ring of Horned Nightmare is also... Oh, we're in combat because of the stupid imps. Ring of Horned Nightmare, where is it? Is this on screen for you guys? Yeah, is another good option. This is going to give us extra imps, which is going to scale with Sacrifice Souls, which is going to give us more Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt damage every time you can think of it. When this does proc, assuming you're casting 3 Shard Hand of Gul'dans, is basically a 12% damage buff because of Sacrifice Souls for 15 seconds, roughly, the duration of the imps. The only downside with this is it's very RNG. It's just random. So you could get 3 of these procs in a game and not be able to utilize a single one of them well. So for that reason, this is lowest for me as far as value with this setup. However, it is an option, and if you are a big fan of this, I know a lot of people like this legendary in general. There's nothing wrong with this legendary. It's just kind of random and is going to be a little bit harder to really utilize the damage. Last but not least, I'm going to say is Grim Inquisitor's Dread Calling Legendary. This one we've talked about. I just did a video on this yesterday. And this is a really surprisingly strong legendary when it comes to PvP. I've been playing with this especially when you're running things like Dreadlash and From the Shadows. You get a lot of value from this because you're kind of prioritizing your Dread Stalkers a little bit more than normal anyway. And there's just a lot of synergy and kind of cohesiveness between this legendary and just kind of consistent damage. Bale Spiders is going to be a little bit on the more bursty side of things, and the Dreadstalker's legendary is going to give you a little bit more kind of consistency. You still have the potential to be able to set up some big bursts with the Dreadstalker legendary, but you know, that's kind of the difference between those two play styles. Really, preference is not one that's completely way better, blows the other one out of the water type of thing. They're both good, just different kind of play styles, and so you can kind of make that decision for yourself. Other things you could mention, like honorable mentions, I guess, would be things like the Life Drain one, or Sifu's, or some of those other ones are also viable options as well. I just don't have those yet personally. Now let's talk about Conduits real quick. The BG should be popping here any second. I'm going to be running Carnivorous Stalkers for this example, but we have a few legendaries that are actually all very good with this setup. Born of Blood, very, very solid because we're basically, you know, relying on our Demon Bolt casts. So this is a very good option if you're in a playstyle or setup or team comp where you are pretty reliably able to hard cast Hand of Gul'dan regularly. This is a lot of value. Another one that might surprise you guys if you guys are Necrolord is Fatal Dissemination. Is actually really good with this build because we scale our Decimating Bolt scales with the Pleasure Through Pain talent. Decimating Bolt also gets a big damage amp from this conduit. Your big burst is basically revolving around your Decimating Bolt and your Power Siphon and pairing those together. So directly increasing the damage done by your Decimating Bolt really does make your burst window stronger. It's very noticeable. It's actually a really fun play style. I've been kind of substituting a bunch of Conduits testing stuff lately, so I don't want to necessarily use my little energy things or whatever they're called to show you guys this, but trust me, test it out, play with it. It's also a very good option, but it definitely gives you more of a big burst profile, more so than like a sustained kind of DPS aspect to this build, so you're going to have to kind of just pick and choose what you want and what you're looking for, what you're trying to play. our basic setup, what we're going to be trying to do here is, in a perfect world, we have a handful of imps out, right? We have some amount of imps out, either through our inner demons. You can see here, I have 2 imps out, allowing us to power siphon. The more imps you have out, the better from a scaling perspective when we're talking about sacrifice souls. However, for your actual burst window, you really only need 2 imps so that you can power siphon and gain 2 charges of demonic core that's going to be amplified from the power siphon ability. Then we want to have 2 shards to basically be able just to cast our Dreadstalkers. And then with our Mortal Coil and our Decimating Bolt off cooldown, we're going to coil and then hard cast our Decimating Bolt because it's such a long cast. But that will basically help ensure that we're able to set up that cast our Decimating Bolt, and then unload those 2 demonic core procs into the target. That target's going to be taking 20% increased damage from the Dreadstalkers from the Shadows debuff. It's going to be taking a damage amp because of Decimating Bolt, and it's also going to be taking a damage amp from Power Siphon. Not to mention, if we have any imps or other minions that we're able to have up at that time, it's going to be hitting very, 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 very hard. So, we'll see. Maybe we can grab Zerking. Someone else is going to grab it. This will be an interesting one to show you guys this, because we're going to have some people that are going to probably be pretty, with the orbs and stuff, we'll probably be able to like one-shot some people maybe in this video if we get lucky enough. Another thing that's worth mentioning here is, unfortunately, the Succubus is a little bit tough to deal with because it's real squishy. So the Succubus has about half as much health as your Felguard does, which is really unfortunate. Okay, so we're lagging here a little bit, but let's go ahead and go over here. And we built up some minions. Let's go. Who should we go? Let's go on the Druid here. Okay, so I'm going to pop my Power Core here first. We're going to coil Decimating Bolt into 2 big Demon Bolts here. 8,600. Another big damage there. You can see the burst though, right? That's a pretty reliable, consistent burst. Popping off, doing about 20k deep damage over that whole kind of opener there. And then the idea is, if you're able to free cast like this, so if these guys aren't going to touch me, my Succubus here is kind of sitting on passive just so it's by me not getting killed. If you do lose your Succubus, you will lose the damage amp and the Shadow Bolt cast time reduction. So you need to be really aware of that and the positioning of your Succubus's health, all that good stuff to really make sure that it doesn't die. The other thing is, I basically am always saving my Decimating Bolt to pair it with my Power Core. I'm going to go ahead and send my pet in here. We're going to cast Decimating Bolt. We're going to coil again. Decimating Bolt. Oh, he bubbled. We'll bring our pet back to us. You see we have Bale Spiders up, but it's going to fall. So this is why it's kind of unfortunate. I really feel like he went stealth. Can we catch him? Nice. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just dump here the shards to try and basically get our shards down to the point where I can hard cast the 4 Shadow Bolts to get our Bale Spiders buff back up. And it's kind of just showing you guys why that it's a great example of why I'm not a huge fan of Bale Spiders. Now we're going to have big damage here if this guy's just going to sit here. Decimating Bolt, Demon Bolt, big damage he's got to deal with. I could hard cast another 3rd Demon Bolt there if I wanted to, probably to finish him off. But you see those are all hitting around 4 or 5k-ish a piece. And those obviously scale up. Now, one thing that you might notice is I have not casted Tyrant at all here yet. Reason being is that your Tyrant is used a little bit different with this build. It is going to shadow lock you, so it's important that if you get kicked on Tyrant, you understand you will not be able to cast any Shadow Bolts. It's not necessarily make or break, but it's just something to be aware of. And the way that I've been using Tyrant in this setup is, if I'm able to free cast for a period of time, I use it to basically get the shards generated, as well as be able to extend the duration of all my imps, giving me a bigger power spike bonus from the sacrificed souls talent. In a perfect world with your Tyrant up, you can get around, 10, 15 imps, assuming you're able to free cast, and that's kind of ideally what you're trying to do. So we can do it here. I'll go ahead and Hand to Dan. He's going to probably die before I can even get this off anyway. I'll go ahead and Tyrant here. Okay, I'm going to Hand to Dan anyway, like this. We'll see if we can get the burst off. Decimating Bolt, Demon Bolt. Oh, the game ended. Point being is you're able to see that we have a lot of burst with this setup. It's a very different playstyle. It's more caster heavy for sure, and it takes some getting used to, but it's really, really fun, and I really do enjoy this setup a lot. Really in BGs, and again, I want to play this more in threes, but wanted to give you guys kind of an alternative build if you're trying to test, maybe play a different playstyle. You're getting kind of bored of the Tyrant, Demonic Consumption build. This is a really fun, viable alternative. It's just a very different play style while still staying Demonology. So if you guys have any questions, by all means, please leave them down below. Sorry we didn't get a longer, more competitive game, but just wanted to kind of show you guys the burst potential there. I've had some 18, 15, 18K crits off those demon bolts, and plan on posting, some montage type stuff of this build as well here in the near future. So let me know if you guys have questions. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.